Hi, my name's Trev Hutchings, and this is my guide to creating a vocal effects chain in BandLab. So here I have a vocal track. I wish I had a ticket to. So now I'm going to add a vocal effects chain. So first, tap on the Effects tab. And then tap on Add Effect. Now the first one I recommend to use in the chain is an EQ. And we're going to use this EQ for cleaning up the microphone input. So click on Tone. And then for this one I'm going to use the Easy EQ. Now you can use other EQs if you want, but this is my suggestion. Okay, so first going to use the high pass to remove low frequency hum from the microphone. And I'm going to go down to the knob and I'm going to click on the knob and I'm going to drag up until it says about 150 Hertz. And that's going to remove the low hum sound that you get from a microphone, some of the kind of foot movement if there was any, and generally anything that's below 150 Hertz. Now if we play that now, I wish I had a ticket to. You should be able to hear there that the low hum has been removed. Next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the frequency, gain and width to remove mic hiss. So I'm going to put gain onto -15. So I'm going to press on the gain knob, drag down until it says -15 or thereabouts. So I'm going to remove sound frequencies, and the width is currently set to 3. I'm going to leave it set to 3. And the width is just how wide the frequency range around the frequency I choose will get reduced in volume. Now I happen to know from my microphone that the frequency is around 430. But if you don't know what it is for your microphone, then just click on play and then listen out for the hiss and then move the frequency knob to try and find where that hiss starts to disappear. I wish I had a ticket to. 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 Now it's important to remember at this point that if your hiss is in the vocal range, to be careful that you don't actually massively change the sound of your vocals in the process of removing the mic hiss. So you might have to move slightly to lower or higher depending on where that mic hiss is from your microphone. Now the last bit of this Easy EQ is the low pass, and I'm going to click on the low pass, press on the low pass, and I'm going to drag up the screen until it says 10,000 Hertz. Although there's not a lot of vocals up there at 10,000 Hertz, it just helps to keep it brighter. So effectively I'm not using the low pass filter here. So next I'm going to tap on Add Effect again. And this time I'm going to tap on Dynamics. And the second thing I recommend adding here is a noise gate. So I'm just going to have to go down, scroll down the list a little bit here. And here we have the noise gate. So I'm going to click on the noise gate. Now once we've got rid of some of the mic noise, the next thing to do is to get rid of all the sound between the vocals, and this will basically clean up your vocals. And to do this we're going to use the noise gate. Now the attack is set to 5 milliseconds and I'm going to leave it at that, and that's how quickly the noise gate will come on and effectively turn off the sound for the track. And although you could put it to 0, putting it to 5 milliseconds just makes it slightly more gradual turn off, which makes it a bit more natural sounding. Now for release I'm going to set that to 100. So if I move the mouse cursor over where it says 200 at the moment and then press on it and then drag down and bring this down to 100, which is actually as the quickest release that it does. And release is how long the noise gate will mute the track. So obviously if it's too long then you could end up missing some of the vocals because it's muted the track for too long and it hasn't opened up again when the vocals start again. So I like to keep it as short as possible, so that's why I stick it on 100 milliseconds. Now the threshold will depend on the loudness of your vocals. I happen to know mine is around -45 dBs, but to set it for yours what you need to do is click on play and then move the threshold, this threshold here, press on this bit here and then move it up and down. And what I would suggest doing is pressing on it and dragging it all the way up. Then press on play and then slowly bring it down until you can hear the vocals clearly, but there's none of the background noise like breath sounds.
To get to, I wish I had to get to, I wish I had to get to.
Now next up I recommend adding a de-esser, so tap on add effect again, and if we scroll through the dynamics tab section we'll find the de-esser and then click on the de-esser. Now basically a de-esser removes what's known as sibilance, which basically is that S sound that you have in vocals, and to some extent the T sound as well. So it removes some of the S so that your vocals don't sound like a hissing snake. Now it won't remove a huge amount, and that's kind of deliberate to a certain degree, because if you remove too much it starts to sound like you've got a lisp, and that's not always a great sound. So it kind of depends on your vocals once again, because higher pitched vocals it would be slightly different to mine, so you might have to adjust this setting a little bit, but for me the frequency is around 6000, so I'm going to press on where it says 9000. I'm going to drag down until it says 6300 or thereabouts. Right, 6200, that'll do. Now once again with the threshold you could drag it up the screen, press on threshold, drag it up the screen, press on play and drag it down till you've removed a desirable amount of the hiss from the S's. But generally I don't think there's a huge amount of difference by changing this range, so here I'm just going to go and put it back on -19 or thereabouts.
I wish I had to get to, I wish I had to get to.
Now the de-esser won't get rid of the hissing sound if there's a lot of it, and I've done other videos on how you should actually adjust the actual vocals itself to remove more hiss if there is some. And now we've reached the point where we can use a graphic EQ and this graphic EQ is going to be used to sculpture the tone of the vocals. So click on Add Effect, click on Tone, and here we're going to click on Graphic EQ. Now exactly how you set up this graphic EQ will rather depend on two things. The microphone itself, because that will colour the sound in its own way, and obviously your vocals. So I'm going to put some settings in here which suit my vocals, and you can use them as a guide for your own vocals, but yours will probably be different to mine. Now these sliders start from left to right, and the one furthest on the left is the lowest frequency, and then it goes up through the frequencies. So if you've got a lot of low frequency, a lot of bass in your vocals, and you want to remove that, then you're going to end up moving these sliders here, these two mainly, to remove the bass from your vocals. And if your vocals sound too trebly, then you're going to want to be moving these two sliders up at the top end here at the right. And if you want to get your vocals to cut more through the mix, then it's going to be generally these three in the middle that will be the ones, probably more over this one here and this one here, which is the 800 and 1.6, are probably going to be the most effective at cutting through the mix. 1.6 more than the 800. So I'm just going to set these up now. For the lowest frequency, I'm going to go down to about -10. And then for the 200 Hertz, I'm going to go for -7.5 or thereabouts. The 400 Hertz is going to be, I'm just going to take a little bit off at 400 Hertz, so that's about -4. So you see I've got this arcing effect that's going on here. 800 Hertz I'm going to leave exactly as it is, and the same with the 1.6 Hertz, because I'm happy with the way my voice cuts through the rest of the mix. And then moving up here now to 3.2 kilohertz, I'm going to put that on -2 or thereabouts, and I like to cut a bit of treble off of my vocals as well, so that's going to come down. I'm going to put that on about -6. So I end up with this.
I wish I had a ticket.
Now that may be not the style of sound that you're looking for, so your settings might be different. Now once you've sculptured the tone of the vocals, the next thing to do is to add a compressor to level out the volume of the vocals. And first I'm going to use the Digicomp to just smooth it over rather than actually come in hard. I'll do that later. So I'm going to click on Add Effect, click on Dynamics, and then click on Digicomp. Now the attack I like to set to -5 so that only just the very beginning of the words are allowed to be uncompressed, and that just gives it a more natural sound and helps your vocals to cut through the mix a bit more. So I'm going to press on the attack knob and drag down till I get about 5 milliseconds rather. Release is how long the compression holds for. Once again, that's something you want to have as low as possible, but if you take it too low you might get a jittering effect, so I'm going to go for around about 100 milliseconds again. Now the ratio, the higher the number on the ratio, or should we say even this knob, the you press on the knob and drag up to the top so it goes all the way, then that will be the maximum compression. And if you press on the knob and drag all the way down, you'll effectively turn compression off. Now, maximum compression at this point would be compressing my vocals a little bit more than I like, so I'm going to go for a 12:1. Which is still reasonably high, but it's also going to allow the vocals some breathing space to still be dynamic at this point. And the knee is currently set at 6, so I'm going to leave it set at 6. And the knee determines how the compression is brought in. So if I was to drag this knee down to 0, then there would be no smoothness. So compression would be either on or off. And if I drag it all the way up to the top where it says 20, then when the compressor is activated, it will slowly start compressing the sound. So basically, the higher the number on the knee, the slower the compression will come in, and the lower the number, the quicker the compression will come in. And here I want to have quite a reasonably natural kind of sound here, so that the compression is brought in reasonably quickly, but not that fast that it is so obvious. So I'm going to set it back to 6. Now, last off is the threshold, and for this one it does depend slightly on your vocals, how loud they are, but I generally like to set this particular one to 17, which is what it more or less is already on. So I'm actually going to leave it at 17.5. That's minus 17.5. So that means that when the volume of the vocals goes above minus 17.5 dBs, the sound above that level will start to be compressed.
I wish I had a ticket.
Now, at this point, you should be happy with the sound of your vocals. If you're not, you need to go back and adjust these things until you are, because at this point on, all we're going to be doing is adding what I call send effects. So at this point, you'd be adding things like reverb or echo, chorus, phaser, any of those kind of things that's going to add an effect to the voice rather than actually be part of the voice itself. Now, what effects you choose is up to you, but here I'm just going to add a reverb. So I'm going to tap on add effect, or rather click on add effect, and click on reverb, and then click on Spacemaker. Now, the first thing that I'm going to change is the type. So I'm going to click on type down here. Type will obviously depend on the genre of your music, but here I'm going to click on room. That's just suits this particular song. Now, mix is how much of the reverb is added to your vocals. Now, I will say right at this point that if I was using a professional DAW, I would not be adding reverb directly to the vocal track. And while I would probably decide instead to actually duplicate this track and use the reverb on that and then set mix to 100%, I'm putting this in here as part of the chain just so that you understand where in the chain is the logical place to put it. So mix, if I put mix to 100%, all you will hear is the reverb. And if I put it to 0, all you will hear is your vocals, and there'll be no reverb on the vocals at all. So It kind of depends on your song, but the idea is you should be able to hear the reverb when you're just soloing the track, the vocal track. But once you actually add in the rest of the song sounds, it should only just be audible. But that rather depends on the genre of your music again, because on some genres the reverb is made deliberately obvious. So here I'm just going to set it to 23%. Now width sets how wide the reverb is in the stereo mix. So if I was to push this all the way up to 10, the reverb would be right out to the left and right. It will keep it a good distance away from the vocals so they wouldn't clash with the vocals, but putting it out so far could end up clashing with other instruments. On the other hand, if you turn it all the way the other end, so you take it down to say 1, then the reverb's going to be very close, almost behind your vocals. So it won't interfere with the other instruments, but it might interfere with your vocals. Now it was originally set to 3, so I'm going to set it back to 3. Which gives just enough space between the reverb and the vocals, but also gives plenty of space for the other instruments. Next up is size. And size is, if you drag all the way up, if I go to 10, now that's, the reverb is going to be as if I'm in a very big room. And the bigger the room, the longer it takes for the reverb to come back to you, because obviously it's got to bounce off the walls and come back. And if I set it really small, say around about 1.9, then I'm in a very small room, so the reverb is going to be much quicker because it's going to bounce off the walls. In a small room, much quicker, it's going to hit those walls and come back to you, so you're going to get a quicker reflection. Now which you choose will rather depend on your vocals, how fast your vocals are, and the style of the music. And here I'm going to go for around about 6. Now finally, damping. Damping affects the higher frequencies of the reverb, and it's used to adjust how much of that high frequency reverb is in the overall reverb sound. And it's something you probably need to play around with to understand quite what it does. But here I'm going to set it to 16 kilohertz. So I'm effectively taking damping off.
I wish I had a ticket. I wish I had a ticket.
Now once you've added all your effects, the next thing to do is add another compressor. So click on Add Effect, click on Dynamics, and this time I'm going to click on BL1176. Now here I'm going to use the BL1176 to do more compression on the vocals, but also to limit the maximum volume. So this will make it almost like a limiter. And once again, the settings will depend on your vocals. Now, the BL1176 doesn't have a threshold setting. So to determine how much compression is on your vocals, you have to set the input level. And I know for mine here, I need to set it to about 18 dB. Now, if it's not high enough, your vocals won't ever be higher than the threshold that's built into the BL1176, so you won't get any compression on your vocals. So that's why I'm increasing the input level so that it increases the input volume of my vocals so that they do go above the threshold and so they do get compressed. Obviously, the higher the input volume level, the more compression to all of your vocals will occur. And if you push it too high, you're going to get a really heavily compressed sound, and it's not going to be very dynamic, and it's not going to sound very natural and to some degree nice. Now, because I've increased the input volume, that's also increased the volume of the whole track itself. So to offset that, I'm going to set output to -10. So that brings the volume of the vocals back down to where it was before this compressor. Now obviously that's because I've set it on -18, and it will to some degree depend on the effects that you've added. So if you want to set it exactly for your vocal track, what you can do is click on the play icon and then press on the bypass button to turn off the BL1176 and then listen to the volume level of your track, and then click on the bypass button again to turn the BL1176 back on and then listen to the volume again. And if there's a difference between the two, you can adjust the output knob until you get them so they're about the same. On the other hand, you might think that your track is a little bit quieter or a little bit too loud and then adjust it either way. So you can use this as almost like a levels, volume level control for your track as well. Now attack once again determines how quickly the compressor comes into action. I'm going to set this to 5. Now release once again is how long the compressor holds the compression before it is reset. And for me, I'm going to set this to 2.5, which seems about right for my vocals. Now finally, we have ratio, and because I'm using this more as a limiter than a compressor as such, I'm going to set that to 20:1. And that's going to control the maximum volume of the output. And at 20:1, that's a very high compression rate, so it's going to act more like a limiter. So it's going to concentrate on making sure that the maximum volume of my track is kept as close to being the same as possible. And that's it. That's my suggested vocal effects chain in BandLab. If you enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and click on that subscribe button. Cheers!